So hi everyone, we're very excited to have you all here with us as we embark on our very first output and very first conversation online as part of our disrupting and reorienting restitution. We are part of the Museums Lab program, or we as a group, we came together as part of the Museums Lab program, which is a platform that is meant to offer an opportunity for professionals and independent scholars, but equally artists, to convene from Africa and from Europe to be able to exchange ideas and knowledge on the future of museums in both Africa and Europe. We are very grateful that you are all able to join us today, but we are equally aware of the privileges that come with a digital or internet connection. I'm joining from Egypt, Cairo, and our internet is usually very patchy and quite unstable. So we do acknowledge the privilege of some to be able to have a digital infrastructure, allowing them to be able to join us here online. We equally acknowledge the great support that we're receiving from our technical team here, who are joining us from the M-Lab, Vivian, Selina, and Puen, and we are very grateful for all of them. Just a gentle reminder for the guidelines of our conversation today. We would kindly ask you to have both your videos and your microphones muted and off during the conversation, and you would be offered an opportunity during the Q&A to have your video on if you wish, and to join us. You are, if you would like to raise a question during the Q&A time, just raise your hand as part of one, which is something that you can do from the reactions on the at the very bottom of your Zoom link here, of our Zoom screen here. And as we aspire, we do acknowledge we aspire equally to create or to develop a very safe environment for discussions. And this is part of why we are here. We are a group of very frustrated individual artists, independent artists, but equally professionals. And we have formed the independent. I'm very excited to be here today. Hence, I get to be a bit clumsy and improvising, but I'm super excited because this is something that we've been preparing for a year on now. When we all met as part of the Museums Lab program in 2022, we are part of the Museums Lab alumni, and we've later received funding from the Goethe Institute in Kenya and support from Savvy Berlin, and we came together because we're frustrated with how restitution is currently being discussed. We aspire to create a people-centered, perhaps multidisciplinary approach to restitution that involves not only objects, but equally the indigenous knowledge that surrounds the various strands of material that needs to be restituted, including indigenous knowledge as well. We aspire to create a safe environment by centering the people, but equally by focusing on having a kind and mindful conversation. This is done during our video today, or during our conversation, our discussion today. We offer guidelines of how we can all together create a safe environment for us during the chat. So initially, if you think that you're being exposed to any discrimination, any criticism, or any type of harm, be it verbal or emotional, you can seek one of the team members of DRR. You can identify them through the DRR acronym that is beside their names. The second thing is that we hope that everyone here can acknowledge that it is very easy to come up with misunderstandings online, and if you felt offended, or if you felt that something did harm you or did upset you, it could have been equally that someone just didn't intend to. So please do openly, but equally with a bit of empathy, disagree with whatever criticism that has been put forward, or whatever ideas that have been put forward. But just make sure that you do it with a bit of empathy, and equally find the right words and the right empathetic words to be able to improvise, or to be able to respond to the variety of questions or the variety of discussions that we're having here. And last thing, be empathetic as much as you can and be kind to one another. We are a very diverse group of museum professionals, as I said, and individual artists. We come from all parts of Africa and equally Europe, from Tanzania, Uganda, Cairo, Frankfurt, Sweden, and we should have a slide with the team members coming up for everyone. Yes, so here we go. So we are quite a diverse team of professionals in museums, but equally artists that we came together during the Museums Lab program last year. And we are hoping to disrupt and equally reorient the discussions that surround restitution. And as it comes that we would be live tweeting the conversation. So if you want to get in touch or if you want to contribute to the conversation online, feel free to follow our Twitter and social media accounts and do tweet the conversation on your opinion as well. You would be offered an opportunity equally to use the chat during our conversation to raise any of the questions, but equally any remarks or any contribution you want to make to the discussion. One important thing is that as we aspire to disrupt and reorient restitution, that doesn't mean that everyone agrees with what we want to do. This is evident, perhaps, from how Instagram had to shut down our account. So we had 2 accounts of us suspended by Instagram, and this justifies, again, the fact that digital platforms could be a way to reinforce inequities and not a place for social justice as we hope it is. Enough of me now, and I think I'm extremely honored and delighted to introduce my colleague and our warrior queen, Sambayong, who would be moderating the conversation and leading the conversation from the disrupting, reorienting restitution side of things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heba, and thank you for that great introduction, Warrior Queen. We're all warriors. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for joining us. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm joining from Lusaka, Zambia, and we're excited to have you here from wherever you are across the world. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Sambayonga, and I'm a member of the Disrupting and Reorienting Restitution Collective, the initiators of this project. I'm also a Museums Lab alum. I'm co-founder of the Women's History Museum as well. I will serve as a moderator for the discussion for today, and my task is to create this open discussion with the incredible minds gathered here. I'll introduce the panelists in a minute, but I just wanted to start by saying that this is a safe space, as Heba said, a safe space of conversations, and we've brought together our artist in residence with our elder from the Zambian Luvale community and a museum expert, scholar, and researcher to unpack the discussion around forbidden knowledge. Our artifact or object of focus is the Makishi mask. The mask is part of a ceremonial regalia that is worn by the Makishi mask dancers that are ancestral guardians of the Mukanda rite of passage ceremony for the boys who are circumcised when they come of age. This is largely a practice done by the Luvale, Chokwe, Mbunda, and Luchazi ethnic groups that can be found in the south of Congo, the northwest and west of Zambia, and the northeast and southeast of Angola in Africa. So it's quite spread in southern East Africa. The objects we're looking at today, the Makishi masks, were taken from Zambia in 1969 by Swedish anthropologist John Erik Elmberg, who was funded by CEDA, a Swedish organization some of you might know. These masks are just 2 from hundreds of objects from Zambia collected over a century ago and have ended up in the National Museums of World Culture in Sweden. I must mention and sort of a disclaimer as well, the museum has been doing work with various partners, including the Women's History Museum of Zambia, which I co-founded, the Choma Museum, community members in Zambia, and other partners to update the information on some of these artifacts that have been collected over the last several decades. It will be evident what I mean when I provide the description of the masks as it is written in the National Museums of World Culture database, Carlotta. In the database, the masks are described in this general manner. I'll actually read the translated text. Description. According to the general catalog, mask, previous but without net, decorated with lines and rings at the eyes, grid pattern squares on the cheeks, dimensions, 37 centimeters Nalindele mask was used by Makishi dancers, the Lozi people Makishi. The second mask is described in a similar way. According to the general catalog, mask made of bark cloth. The face is made of wood, painted with dark brown paint, decorated with small holes at the eyes, nose, and forehead. A net with a hole in the center is stretched between the front and the back edges. Dimensions, front edge, top, back edge, 49 centimeters. Nalindele mask used by Makishi dancers, the Lozi people Makishi. These are two different masks, but have more or less the same description, if you have noticed. But they're actually significantly different in their origin and use. They are called Nalindele, but one of the correct names, because they have many, are Mwanapueo or Mwanapo, which in this description is written just in a footnote of the description in Carlotta. They are described as being from the Lozi people in Western province of Zambia, but in actual fact, the Lozi people do not practice this ceremony at all. The etching on the cheeks and the forehead are just given general graphic descriptions with no further notes. You might not be able to see because obviously the images might be far, but if you look closely, you will notice that the etchings are actually symbols. And these symbols are of the Luvale, Chokwe, and Luchazi and Bunda called Tusona, which is the language of the ancestors used to store and transmit indigenous knowledge. These symbols are important for the Mukanda ceremony, which we'll be talking about today, as they denote vital knowledge that is communicated during the ceremony. For example, the square symbol seen on one of the masks is called Chingolongondo, which represents the heritage and signifies the place of knowledge. It also symbolizes the origins of Mukanda ceremony, and it is embedded within it a secret science. We'll hear more of this from our Mwata. This is from research done by scholars on the Makishi subject, which I might say is not very easy hard to find. I wanted to make that distinction because it sets the tone for us to understand the impact on forbidding knowledge in indigenous communities. As we start the discussion, to help us in this conversation, we have our very distinguished speakers who I'll introduce. I will start by introducing our elder, Mwata Chiweka Vitonde, from the Luvale community of the Chinyamachamukwai communities consisted of the Luvale, Luchaze, Chokwe, and Bunda of the northwestern part of Zambia. They practice the Mukanda ceremonies and are owners of the Makishi. Mwata attended the Mukanda school in his home village called Mbunde and in Kalabo district when he was 10 years old. In 2007, he became a Chijika Mukanda, the one that plans a Mukanda school, basically setting up a Mukanda school. He has the authority to do that. For the first time in his home village, when his firstborn son, who was 8 years old then, was ready to go through the initiation. Now you can only become a Chijika Mukanda once you have a child who's ready to go through the initiation. And that's why he was accorded this privilege. His father was also a Chijika Mukanda before him and passed on the knowledge to him. This year, Bamwata became a Chijika Mukanda for the second time when his 11-year-old and fifth-born was ready to undergo the ceremony. His third-born son and nephew, aged 17 years, were part of the assistance. I would also like to introduce Victoria Phiri Chitungu. She is a cultural historian and director of Livingstone Museum in Zambia. She has also worked as a researcher for the National Museums Board of Zambia for more than 20 years, specializing in Zambian cultures. She has done extensive field work across the country with a special focus on initiation ceremonies in urban areas of Zambia. Among them are research works on the teaching aids in initiation ceremonies for girls from the eastern and northern parts of Zambia, initiation rites of the Mukanda ceremony for the boys from northwestern Zambia, and the associated Makishi masquerade, as well as songs and dances associated with it. But Victoria also serves as a cultural consultant for the Women's History Museum of Zambia, is a member of the International Council of Museums, ICOM, and a board member of the African Museums and Heritage Restitution, AfriHare, an organization that looks at the protection, preservation, and restitution of African artifacts and heritage in the diaspora. Thank you for joining us, Victoria. And finally, we have our artist in residence, Mihayo Kallaye, who will also be in conversation with our speakers in an attempt to glean knowledge that he will use to inspire his artwork. Mihayo is a Tanzanian multimedia installation artist. He creates thought-provoking works that incorporate video, sound, fabric, and found objects. By exploring the post-colonial situation in Africa and delving into African history, spirituality, and politics, his installations invite audiences to engage with these complex topics. With experimental techniques like borrowing texts, drawings, collages, and stitching, Kallaye's art offers unique perspectives and insights. Thank you all for joining us in this incredible discussion. I'm looking forward to starting. This space is yours, so I'd like you to dive right in, and I'll start Navamwata with a demonstration of one of the various forms of indigenous knowledge, communication, and transmission during the Kanda ceremony. And in this case, it will be a song. So Vamwata, when you're ready, please give us your song, Sakulila Chikuma.
Thank you so much. As I said, my name is Chiweka Vitonde. The Mukanda is a school for a spiritual place where it involves prayers. Like in the morning, we pray songs to our ancestors. As I can sing the song, Tangwe, Tangwe, Mwene ngungu kumulioko tukokele Tangwe, Tangwe, Masaka panda kamironga tukokele Tangwe, Tangwe. That song means they initiate, they praise their ancestors and to ask for them to have health and to protect them. And they know that they are the one who can protect them. As I said, it's the spiritual things. We inherit this from our ancestors. First, I want to tell the world at large that the information
Sakura Chukuma Mwata, thank you for the song. And we're really excited to dive into the conversation with you. So we'll just kick off right away. But we just wanted to highlight and show that someone might come and witness the Mukanda, and they'll see people singing, they'll see people dancing, they'll see people doing certain acts, and they'll wonder whether it's a school and whether there's knowledge being transmitted. And we thought it would be really good to just show an example of what transmission of knowledge looks like in an indigenous community. And obviously this is practiced across many indigenous communities. But we'll start with the question. You obviously heard me talk about the masks and give a brief introduction from where it sits in the museum and what the general meaning is. But can you give us a proper description of what the actual mask is?
Thank you so much, everyone. The mask, it's very difficult to explain if it is only the mask, because there are a lot of masks we have in Luvale culture. So if it is a complete thing where we can identify, the first one I can explain about the Mwanapevo, which they are saying is the mask for the lost people. That is a lie, it's not true. That mask is belong to the Luvale group. As she was said, the Luvale, Chokwe, Luchazi, and Bunda. And if it speaks Luvale, not laws. And the laws are not part and parcel of the Luvale group. And secondly, we have marks like Lishano, the wife to the king. But the difference that the Lishano is big on the body to the Manapeo. And also we have Mwari, describing a young lady who is in shade. So Mwanapevo is a mask for women ancestors who passed a long time ago. So we always remember them when we see the Mwanapevo. And its role is to communicate between the Tundanji and their mothers. When people see Mwanapevo going to the village, all the people, all the women are very happy to see that their children at Mkanda camp, they are safe. And it also brought the greetings to them from their children. And when it performs there, they give that Mwanapevo some gifts and they take it to the children there. And from there, when we call a Mwanapevo, it's during the Mkanda ceremony, because there's some what we call another maski, Chimwiza, which can perform it at any time. But the Mwanapevo performance only when there is Mkanda. But Chimwiza can perform at any time, at any place. That is the difference.
I find that very interesting that you started by saying it's difficult to explain the mask on its own because it doesn't operate on its own. And in the museum, it's in isolation and separated from the community. So its actual function, its meaning is actually changed. And you have to put them together for them to make sense as a unit, because they operate as the unit, and the transmission of knowledge is a unit. And that's something we've been interrogating as a collective to try and understand, and connecting with source communities such as yourself to better understand what the actual accurate knowledge is. So thank you for highlighting that. I'm sure we'll delve a little deeper, but I wanted to go into the segue into the next question. And obviously the theme and conversation is about forbidden knowledge, and the Mkanda ceremony and Makishi masquerade are examples of this. And they were banned at some point, or they were oppressed during the colonial and religious occupation of the country. I would just like to emphasize and to read an excerpt of text from an anthropologist, Colin Turnbull, in his book, The Lonely African, describing the Mukanda ceremony. And I read in part, in this initiation, the boys are cruelly circumcised and taught all manner of evil, including sex. I could not allow it. It goes on to say, but instead of understanding, the villagers said I had done an evil thing. I told them that what I had done was not evil and that it was the work of the Lord. And in a blasphemy I hate to repeat, the village leader said, I too am a man of God. This is just a single account of the oppression that Indigenous communities faced in many ways. Why were Indigenous practices like Mukanda banned, and what impact has this had? Maybe you can speak a bit around that, Amwata.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone who is listening. Mukanda were banned because they thought it was evil thing, but it was not like that. And you know, when the colonial came to Africa, they thought everything which Africans are doing, it was wrong, including the Mukanda. And therefore now we have a lot of impacts that our people now are confusing. They're no longer doing cultural thing. For example, instead they take their children for circumcision to the Mkanda camp, they take them to the hospital now. Therefore, after going there, two more of those children, they want to go to Mukanda to learn. And they can learn things because the exercise started in the day of circumcision. That's why as Luvale, we take our children when they're still young to Mukanda to teach them how to become responsible in the community, not for sexy, for evil. That is a lie.
And does this still happen even now in our communities? Because obviously this was about 50 and 60 years ago.
Yes, it's still happening, and now we find a lot of challenges to perform our duties, like to make a Mukanda, especially in urban areas, like here in Livingstone. The civic leaders, they're against us. The police, they're against us. The church, even the education system also is not favoring us. For example, I'm an SADA member. My fellow members are no longer greeting me because I had Mkanda, so I'm an evil man. That is not true. That is culture, not evil. Every tribe in Zambia they have their own culture. And those tribes which are not practicing their culture, they see that is a wrong thing. And their children, they follow our culture because it's a rich culture. Therefore, school, there's some school like SADA school, Roman Catholic school, they don't want someone who is a Kandanji. So it's not right to violate someone's right. To go to Mukanda is not a crime. It's a traditional thing. Also, I have a case of my nephew and my son. They're in custody for they're in remand for 2 months now because of that traditional. There was a day when we went to area where Tundans came to perform the duties. When they came back, as you know, that the mask, the Makishi, they go to the people and entertain. Then they found someone to entertain, and he gave them 10 kwacha. And because of the police that are not supporting us, he went to the police and reported that he was forced to give them money. And my two children I have charged for aggravated robbery up to now. and they're 17 years old. They're up to now, since this is the third term, they never go to school. And their life is in danger, because if someone is not educated, their life is not good in future. So I'm appealing to anyone to assist me for my children. And you know that aggravated robbery is not bondable or bail. So it's a challenge. Even those who want to practice to make him kanda, they are fear now because of that situation. Because the police, the civic leader, the church, the against. But to tell the world the truth that the mukanda is not for evil thing or criminality. We teach children self-reliance, discipline, and etc. etc.
Thank you, Bamwata, and I'm really sorry to hear about the incident with your children, and I hope there's a way that it can be helped. I know Victoria is supporting you in that effort, and we'll continue supporting you as well. But I just wanted to highlight as well a couple of things before we start talking to Victoria, in that this is obviously a leftover from the colonial days, where even though post-colonization, we still took on some of the perceptions and laws and restrictions that were imposed by the colonial state. And we, as a country, and this happens in many other African countries as well, have not had the time to review and look into the duality of our community living, because we have the cultural life and we have the urbanized or modern life. And it seems that these two can coexist, and we still exist in an environment where there's a lot of oppression and misunderstanding around our cultural and indigenous life. And I also wanted to point out an example that even though there's a perception of negativity around Mukanda and circumcision, it was interesting to note around 20 to 25 years ago, but Victoria, I'm sure you can comment on this as well. During the height of the HIV pandemic in Zambia, circumcision was introduced as a medical procedure to actually help reduce the transmission of HIV. And that is an indigenous practice that has never even been acknowledged or even attributed. And yet there is this conflation and confusion around what value indigenous knowledge has. And it's so interesting for us to be here and hear firsthand from a community member and allow us to unpack and discuss this. So for now, maybe I'll invite Victoria, you can come in and respond to some of the comments Bamwata has made. Obviously, Bamwata, you're still free to join into the conversation as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Samba. A very interesting conversation, and I want to start from the clarification that Mwata made about the masks as we see them in the museums. You know, he clearly points out that it's very difficult to identify this mask as it is incomplete and out of context. So to call it Mwanapuevo, it's just one part of what this mask could be. But according to him, it's the functions that Mwanapuevo performs. So Mwanapuevo can only appear during Mukanda period and can only appear together with other masks because they are all a representation of their ancestors. And Mwanapuevo is a female ancestor. And her role, like he said, is to, you know, when children and their mothers are separated, the Mukanda school was well aware of the psychological and social aspects that would come in when you separate the mother from their children and the children from their mothers. To mitigate that, Mwanapuevo goes out to the community to reassure them, to bring greetings to the community and to the mothers that your children are okay. And the mothers are always eager to see Mwanapwewa, and they are so happy when they see Mwanapwewa, because it means that they are now receiving greetings from their children. And in return, after Mwanapwewa performs, they give her gifts to take to the children. So the children also, when they receive those gifts, they know, they are reassured that their mothers have not forgotten them. They still have the love of their mothers, and they are also happy to in the camp, even if they are separated from their parents, but there is that connectivity. So this is Mwanapwewa. But the same mask, when it dresses differently, different costume, it becomes Lishono. Is that Lishono? Lishano. Yes, he says it's Lishano, which is the wife of the king. And the role is different. It's that of the wife to the king. Then when the same mask, when it dresses into a different costume, that of a mwali, which is a girl that has come out as an initiate, it performs differently, and it's shy, it's modest. While Mwanapwewa is never modest. Mwanapwewa has got lots of authority because it's coming from the ancestors. Mwali is modest, shy, and is different from Mwanapwewa in terms of costume. Then Shimwiza, is that Shimwiza? Shimwiza is the one that performs detached from the ancestors. They've got nothing to do with the Mukanda ceremony at all. So to have this mask isolated, out of context, put on a shelf and calling it Mwanapwewa, West is still calling it to belong to the Lozi, you could see the disappointment in Mwata. And sometimes these are the things that we do as curators and give out as authoritative information to the public. Meanwhile, the owners of the information and the owners of the knowledge do not recognize even what we put in the museums. So as this mask is detached from its functions, detached from its costume, it's nothing to Mwada. He can't recognize it properly. Then I'll also comment on the colonial government and the extract that you read. That was how Mukanda was banned. The colonial government, the British government then in the colonies, emphasized that the colonies enjoyed freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of association. But in actual fact, there were limitations, and the limits were the systems of permits, registration, fees, and the colonial government could ban any organization that, in its view, threatened the peace of the colony. So most of the organizations that threatened them were gatherings of men. If men gathered, that was a threat to the British colony. And you can imagine the Mukanda ceremony. This is an all boys space. And the British tried different ways, including religion. That extract you read was from a religious leader. But funny enough, when he says, the leader of the Mukanda said, I'm also doing God's work. To me, today, when Mwata started this conversation, he started by praying and singing a song that this initiate starts with every morning. You know, they don't start the day without praying. So in the Mukanda leader's view, he was right. He was doing God's work. And even today, we started with that prayer from Mwata. And I believe what we are doing here is God's work. But when you listen to him, he's been persecuted by religious leaders. His churchmates cannot speak to him this year because he was a Chijika Mukanda. They perceive him to be evil. So the British or the colonial government used the systems like religion to spread the propaganda that Mukanda is evil. So other ethnic groups that don't have mukanda. This is the only information they have, and they believe that mukanda is evil. Then when we meet in the urban areas, those that practice mukanda are facing a community of other people that have been fed with this propaganda that mukanda is evil, and they believe it. And you see it in the way the police are behaving now towards these young boys who have been charged with aggravated robbery. It's a very big crime. Whatever happened, I was not there, but I'm just imagining what aggravated robbery happened at that point. And they have been in custody for 2 months. You can imagine that psychologically what the community is going through. Those other people that would want to do the same mukanda ceremony, as it is now, they are afraid, including Mwata. I don't know psychologically what he's going through. What about those young boys who are there? Even if they are released tomorrow, will they be willing, to perform a mukanda in future with the experience that they've had? So the systems made sure that you are afraid to practice the ceremony, even when you know it is good. Then the removal of the knowledge system from the young people and the elders, once that is done, because these boys, we can see them as a conduit into the next generation. But if you remove that conduit, then this knowledge becomes hanging the same way we are looking at that mask. That mask is hanging according to what Mwata has given us as an explanation. And if you look at the schools, again, the British rule used schools to discourage the continuity of mukanda. So children were not allowed to go back to school after they go into mukanda. So if they do that, children now were afraid to go to mukanda. They could not be initiated. And even today, this is still happening. It's something that I've received from that colonial perspective. Children are being sent away, and some schools which don't send away the children, what they do is that they don't, the school system does not fit into the mukanda system. So Mwata had explained at some point to me that, the children need to heal. They have a period where they don't do anything until they have healed. But the school system says, we can have you, you can go to your initiation, but you should be coming to school every day. So how do the two come together? In some countries where they respect cultures, they've made schools to fit into the cultural programs of the community. And for me, I would say, why not do the same for the Mukanda school? And even why not have teachers that have gone through the Mukanda ceremony to be teaching at the Mukanda school, so that these children, we can be provided with education while we are answering to their cultural needs, because Zambia has signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to say that everyone has the right to their culture. Then why are we making it so restrictive for these people that want to observe their culture? But the last point that I want to mention, Samba, is what you mentioned on HIV and AIDS. All this time, when the Luvale groups were doing circumcision itself was termed as evil. But when HIV and AIDS came on and they realized that circumcision was one of the answers, the government quickly pronounced that circumcision was good, but they did not put it in the context of mukanda, such that up to now, mukanda is still demonized, but circumcision is still upheld without any reference to the mukanda school, even just to thank them that while we were in the dark, you knew. And now that we know, thank you so much. And how do we work together? They don't. And what is happening now, instead of this pronouncement being good, it's bad for the Mukanda school, because children are going to the hospital to be circumcised, but meanwhile they want their culture. Then afterwards they go to the Mkanda school. And what Martha has just explained here is that the lessons start from the circumcision. You can't have one part of the lesson elsewhere and come and rejoin at another point. And at a certain time, the Mkanda school was condemned that they use one knife. But Mukanda has also been responding to the changes. Why not the government going into there to see the changes that the Mkanda school has responded to, and to say that this school is safe, and let them practice instead of just putting a blanket statement that they are evil, they are doing evil things. And what they don't go into is such aspects as for a person to have a Mukanda school, like Mwata he has done, the requirement is that you are supposed to have one of your children in there. So you can't have a Mukanda school and you don't have a child that qualifies to be there. So the community, the Luvale community, they knew that, you know, things can go wrong in such a camp. So the owner of the camp has to have their child there so that they can have the interest of the camp. That was a deliberate move so that you as a parent, you can also take care of the environment of whatever happens around the Mukanda school so that nothing goes wrong, because your child is part of that. So there is already a measure to make sure that the school is safe for children. But all these things are not recognized by the government. Worse still, even what is taught in the schools are not recognized. The Mukanda school teaches discipline, it teaches determination, it teaches self-reliance, it teaches creativity, and most of these things are not even part of the school syllabus as we know it. And no one is mentioning those good things that are done at Mukanda, but only mentioning the bad things. One lesson from the Mukanda is taking care of the environment. Luvale people never use charcoal to cook. They always use dead wood to cook. And this lesson is learned from the Mukanda. Right now, Zambia is facing high deforestation because we use charcoal. And it's so freely used and destroying the environment because most of the people have not gone through Mukanda. And even those that could have gone, they are less, meaning that the knowledge that is acquired there is not in the community. If it's there, it's in a very minimal margin, and we can see the impacts.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I feel your passion, trust me, like I know exactly, and we've had many of these conversations, but it's really interesting that you center the idea of this duality where they're the same kind of valid knowledge systems that impact our lives of the community, but one is invalidated and the other is validated because it's associated to a certain knowledge system, which is usually connected to the West. And these are the things that we really want to unpack, that we want to interrogate, and we want to center. And we're grateful that we have scholars such as yourselves and the elder who are doing this work of centering. And because we realize that if we don't do this work, nobody else will. And it's important to put down and document and center the different kinds of knowledge storage that we had, whether it's the Tusona, whether it's through singing, but also using different forms of technology as well. And this duality, like you said, is actually creating a situation where people, communities are separated from their identity, they don't value who they are, and it impacts the life and future of our countries. I say countries because I know other African countries also go through this. Is this something that you've seen in your research? I'll just ask this question before we move on to Mihayo, because I'm sure he's dying to ask many questions.
Yes, actually, I've seen. Is that the question to me, Samba?
No, carry on with that.
Yeah, in my research, actually, I've seen this, where this duality is at, it's neck on neck. And hello?
No, you can go ahead. We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And what is so funny about this whole thing is I think HIV and AIDS really did put us, on the spot, because as a community, we already had answers for a disease like that one. But still, because of our colonial legacy, the only answer that we wanted and which we wanted to implement was supposed to come from the West. If it came from a local perspective, it was not accepted. It was either ignored or the propaganda was spread around it. And then we were busy waiting for the West to instruct us on how to behave. Meanwhile, the lessons and the solutions were right under our nose. That's what makes this research so interesting. You start wondering, what is it that we want? Is it the solutions, or is it just some packaged thing from somewhere else to come and be implemented in our society, even when we have that kind of knowledge?
Exactly. I agree 100%. Thank you so much, Victoria. Kusakula chikuma mwata, kusakula chikuma. Mihayo, I'll let you ask the question because I know you're dying to ask questions.
Yeah, I have some questions, but it was very good to hear Mr. Mwata and Madam Victoria speaking. It was very powerful, very strong, and it proves for me that still, as Africans, we're still fighting for our own independence, because it has never complete. It's never complete. We have to still push, still fight, and until one day we'll stand in very colorful flags as Africans. I had so many questions, and I feel like most of them have been answered, but still I have some that I want to ask. And I will start with the one that nowadays Makishi has evolved a lot from my research, and it has been practiced more in very less restricted spaces, like how it used to be pre-colonial. Like nowadays it's even used in to perform in front of tourists and everything, and also even the colors have changed. I was reading somewhere like nowadays even the colors from the national flag of Zambia is incorporated in the masquerade itself. I just want to hear your perspective on this in relation to restitution as Africans, because we know most of us as Africans, we lost the connection to our roots. And so most of Africans are trying to find, okay, what are the roots that are already remaining there that we can at least hang on, at least it can help us to remember what we used also to do. As we know, as Africans, we have so many cultures, so many tribes. So I want to know your perspective. How does this affect the Makishi practice itself? Like, does it reduce its effect, or does it increase people in the society to get to know like Makishi? That was the first question. And the second question is, I know you have talked about the government and everything, but I still believe there's a strong importance for the government and the policies of pre-colonial Africa to really acknowledge our traditional practices, our spiritual practices. And so far, I know now I'm talking to people who are very directly to Makishi. How far are you to push this agenda for the government to acknowledge, especially Mukanda, because Mukanda is a school, for me it's a school. I wish I grew up in a place that I had such a school, because it's really relevant to myself as an African. So I want to know, so far, what are you doing to make the government really acknowledge that Makishi or Mukanda is really, really essential for the community, especially for the Luvale people? Yeah. Did you get me?
Victoria, would you like to start, and maybe Bamata Amukumbulula, you respond to that as well?
Yeah, I want to pick one question which I got clearly, like would what can we do to make the government appreciate Mukanda, right? Was that your question? Yeah. Um, you know, that question is not about what we are to do. That thing, that question is looking at so many things. First of all, I know deep down their hearts, some of them in government, they do appreciate Mukanda. Some of them have even gone to the Mukanda school. And some of them privately, they do take their children to the Mukanda school. I think what is happening is the question of power. Who is determining our policies in Africa? So most of the Western countries, they still have control over our countries in terms of aid, support, and all those things comes with strings attached. And sometimes this government, those in government, they fail to make decisions, even when they know it is wrong. So like HIV funding came with lots of, money, but they did not want ourselves to address it in the manner that we knew it, because we were going to look knowledgeable. And I want to mention here that what made me start researching into the Mkanda ceremony for boys, the ceremonies for girls, was actually the HIV. That's what made me do that. Because I saw that as I worked in the museum, the collections had lots of information and answers. And my question was, why are they not being used? And we did put up an exhibition one time, and I don't want to mention the country that supported us, but when they saw the direction we were taking, where we were revealing the solutions that we had within our communities, the funding was withdrawn. And even myself, I've been a target of not being at the center of museum work, because I am narrating a story in the way that it's not supposed to be. So it's not a question of pushing who, it's a question of who has power around us. I can easily be eliminated, I can easily be moved out from the system. And there are so many people that are afraid to tell it as they know it. So it's a very difficult question. For me, forums like these ones are the best, because we need to come together in Africa and say we have a knowledge, and that knowledge, can we present it in truth and not present it in isolation the way that mask is standing in the Swedish museum. Because I will tell you that that's exactly the way a curator in Zambia will also present it. Not because they don't know the information, but because they're afraid to give a narrative that is not government. And we are government institutions. We get grants from the government to exist as museums. So if we peddle a story that they don't like, they can easily do anything. And that's the problem.
Thank you, Victoria. Mihai, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it gives me more questions to work around this topic, so it's good.
Great. Do you have any other question?
It's the
There's a
second
question
one.
here asked about the Makishi wearing a Zambian flag, changes in that. I think
Yes.
Marta can answer it. I think we have that.
Thank you very much. The changes, it's a lot of changes because of the impact or the challenges we face. Because a long time ago, when young people were taught how to do things, it was different. Because someone, as we said, first he goes to the hospital, later on he joined the Mkanda camp. It's very difficult to that young boy to perform well. He can do whatever he feels is good. But the good thing what we should do is to teach our children the way our ancestors taught us from the beginning when they are still young, and tell them. And the other thing, as we like in urban areas, there are some materials which are not found here. It's very difficult to find it in towns, and there are some restrictions for us to do so. But like those Mkanda camp in the villages, they do things correctly. But that is what we want, to restore our culture, to restore our value, so that even people see that we are still doing things the way it was. In fact, we find that because of our rich culture, the young boys who are not belonging to our group, they join us, and also the government or the civic leader says that we are kidnapping those children. And those who are joining us from other different tribes, it's difficult to teach them. Sometimes they don't even understand the language. So when they do things differently. So it's very difficult, as Victoria said. The government is not considering us. They don't give us power. If they giving us power, we have right to say this is wrong. But when you say this is wrong, as people knows that it is an evil thing, which is not true. Yes, and you can say when they put a Kitenge for Zambian flag, so that they can know that is a Zambia mask. But a mask must be originated from the culture of the people, and we don't need to change anything in history. When we change anything, which means now it's different from the origin. Thank you.
And also, Samba, on that question, there's also, like he explained earlier, the mask is different. Mwanapueblo is different. Chimweza, who is an individual mask and can do anything and is not attached to the ancestors, he can perform at social functions. Mostly, those are the ones that will also incorporate other things. But because there is no forum to explain these things, people will just say, "Oh, that's Mwanapueblo," but he knows that's not Mwanapueblo. You know, yeah.
Exactly. That's a very valid point, and I think there are a lot of questions around, like who does the identification and denoting what it actually is, and this whole idea of the material being changed and used. Trying to catch up with modernity is also kind of interfering with the authenticity of the material, the authenticity of the costume itself and its meaning. Like earlier, I introduced the marks on the cheeks of the wooden mask. So now, if you look at Mwanapueblo, you don't really see a lot of that, or even a lot of them. Some of them are painted, so it won't be as significant. So through replacing some of the materials and changing some of the original way that the masks and the costumes were made, it's actually losing a lot of the indigenous knowledge, which is stored in the actual costumes. And I find that interesting as well, and an important point of discussion for the work that is being done. Mihayo, did you have another question?
No, so far, most of them they answered when they were explaining about everything. So I think
Overload of information, processing.
It was very good what they presented. So, like, it's very good.
Okay. Bamwatana, Victoria, I'm going to ask if you've got any final comments and responses, reflections on the discussion that we've had before we open it up to the public, because I could already see there's so many questions coming in. Let's make use of the time that we have left to interact with the public. And thank you so much for this really, really insightful conversation.
Yeah.
Would you like to have last reflections by Victoria? na Bamwata.
Yeah, and I'll say something and then Vamwata can close. He's elderly than me. Yeah, so I would comment. One comment I want to make is that the recently the Mukanda ceremony, they are being accused of kidnapping children, and this is not true because the ceremony is supposed people are supposed to go to the school voluntarily. The parents are supposed to volunteer and bring the children there, so there is no kidnapping as it's being painted. And also, they say that the children are not well taken care of. And when they come back, they are not the same. One part of the ceremony, when they are finishing the ceremony, is that the Tundanji, the initiates, they come out wearing those hats, you know, the big hats, and they're looking down. And when they reach the place where they're supposed to meet their parents, the tradition has it that the parents should come and unveil the child, and they are asked, is this your child? Has anything changed from your child? So before the parent picks the child, they're supposed to identify and confirm that everything is okay, because according to Mwata, they don't change the child in any way. What they change is the mindset and the circumcision. Everything else, your child is intact. And the tradition does provide for that checkup. So if people have questions, they just need to ask the people that are doing the Mukanda to find out that what is it that you do to ensure that nothing goes wrong. And that is one of the provisions. So the whole process has got checkmates to make sure that everything is fine. What you can say something if you have something in the end. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I'm really very happy that the world now is know the truth. Yeah, the Mwanapoes belong to the Luvale group, not to any other tribe apart from Luvale, Chokwe, Wechas, and Mbunda. That is our mask, not the laws. That is wrong information which we have in this Swedish museum and other. So from today, the worldwide should know that that is our belongings. The Luvale people of Zambia, Bakachinyama, they are still alive. We are still alive. We want also to recruit our young men so that our culture continues. Yeah. Even there is some intimidation, but we cannot fear because that is our ancestor who left it to us, and we shall continue. As I was saying, I'm appealing to you, the well-wisher, the international community, to help me, these two children of mine who are in mind. Otherwise, I need your help so that also we continue to promote our culture. And also, we are appealing to the government that they should consider us as human, as Zambians. We are Africans, so we should be proud with our culture. Everyone must pride with his or her culture. Otherwise, thank you so much to everyone.
Sakura Chukuma Mwata, Sakura Chukuma Victoria. So we will now open it up to public discussions. I can see there are already questions. How we'll do it is Ino, who's one of our team members. If you want to say something, you can raise your hand and you'll be identified and then also we'll call out some of the questions from the chat, and Bamwata and Victoria will respond.
Hi, everyone. Just making sure you can hear me. Yes?
Hi.
Hello. Okay, thank you so much. That was so insightful. I won't spend any time sharing my personal reflections because we have so many comments and questions from the chat. So if, like Samba said, if you want to speak, please raise your hand and we can spotlight you and hear from you. Otherwise, I'll start with some of the comments that we got in the chat. And I apologize ahead of time if I mispronounce your name. I'll try my best to pronounce things correctly. The first comment is from Francesca. Francesca said, really appreciating learning our culture/identities from our own voices. Thank you for putting together this incredible event. So we're really grateful for that. Thank you very much. And then I'll just move into the next comment that came from Jacob, saying colonial arrogance and pride does not allow them, by them meaning those who colonized us, to apologize for most wrongs. We have seen them apologize for genocide, but they do not pay attention to another form of genocide called identicide. I find that comment really interesting because I know there was a conversation that was happening about the sort of loss of identity that came with moving the mosques to outside of the local context. The first question that we have is from Nkea Julius, and that says, how do you incorporate the cultural values of the Mukanda in a school curriculum where the government is hostile to such values?
Yeah, I want to take that question. First of all, we are not specifically advocating for the curriculum to adapt the Mukanda curriculum. What we are saying is that can the school calendar take care of the Mukanda ceremony? I'll give an example of a school in some countries where you have nomads, and the school system is in such a way that the education follows the nomads. It does not tell them to stop and sit and then wait for the education to come, but the school system has been created for those people that it follows them. Teachers are sent out on the trails of the nomads as their culture. And what we are asking in Zambia is something similar, that for the people that are practicing Mukanda, can they have a school calendar that allows them to do what they are supposed to do? They can even have people who have gone through Mukanda to go to the camp, to go and teach the children, because at a certain point when they have not yet healed, they cannot move out of the camp. But now the school calendar forces them to move out of the camp to go to school even when they have not yet healed. So it is against the rules of the Mukanda school. And also the period in which they are supposed to do their curriculum. Normally, they would want to finish their syllabus in about 5 to 6 months. But because the school calendar does not allow them, they have to do it in 1 month when schools are closed. So it's a crash program. They are not finishing their syllabus. So why can't the school system, the government devise a system that allows these children to still go through the Mukanda school and also attend formal school? So that's the question we have for the Zambian government. You can say something, Yamad?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, I can add something, make especially on education. You know, as I said, Mukanda is a school. As we don't have books, but we give knowledge to the young boys permanently. So even the government is supposed to proud that how these people are teaching these young ones without the books. They are using only knowledge from the head, knowledge which was given from their forefathers. So it's supposed to be very happy and engage us how we do it. Because sometimes in a formal school, a person can go to school and learn, but two more is failed. But us, our children, they don't fail. As I said, I went to the school Mukanda 1984. Up to now, I know everything concerning Mukanda. It's very, very, very interesting because, but I don't have books. The books are in my head. So we really emphasize the government to consider us as that we are doing good things. And in the Mukanda camp, we don't teach things which are not good. We teach them discipline, to respect elders, how to fish, how to farm, because not all everyone who is going to school will be working, but those who know how to, as in Luvale, we are farmers, we depend on farming, and if we have food, that is good. Not if we don't teach our children as early stage, it will be very difficult in the government to control the youth because they will wait to be given. But when we taught them things like handicrafts, farming, fishing, it's very easy to them to sustain themselves. And in fact, we don't teach criminality. Sometimes we cooperate with the police if there is a criminal at Mkanda camp. When we receive the information, we take that criminal to the police officers until we clear it. That is to work with the community, but it's too more. They don't understand us. So what we emphasize to the government is to consider us and those who don't have their culture to promote their culture, because these young men who are joining us, they don't know where to belong. You see, that is the challenge to the young men who are not belong to any ethnic group or any culture. So otherwise, I'm very, very, very grateful to tell the people the truth that the Mkanda camp is not for evil thing, is to teach young boys to become self-reliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have a few more questions.
Yes. So thank you so much for your reflections. I'll move on to another question that was in the chat. And just a gentle reminder, if you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand and we are happy to incorporate questions that way as well. The next question is from Chansa. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And the question is, what was the context that this man took these masks to Sweden? Has this, and I presume by this man, Chansa means the Swedish anthropologist, I believe the name was John Elmberg. Has this information been changed in their museum concerning the origin and function of the Makishi masks? Elaine was also curious about this and said at the beginning it was mentioned that they were collected in 1969, which is after independence.
Maybe Samba can answer that question.
Yes. As I said in the beginning, so during the colonial period, a lot of the countries in the West and mostly Europe would come along on voyages with the British. Some of them were Swedish people. So just as they came with the British to take over and occupy the countries, they would also do the same. And then along the way, they would collect. This particular collection was in 1969, which was post-independence. So it's most likely a residue of other anthropologists who had gone to do field work in the communities and collect. In the museum, in the National Museums of World Cultures, for Zambia, there's actually over 800 objects that were collected over 100 years. So they're different things. And we have been doing work with the museum to correct some of the metadata, to analyze the objects and understand how they got there, to look at the asymmetries that have taken place as a result of being removed from their source communities. So that's how that object and a lot of other objects got there. So in 1969, they still would have been, even if it was after independence, a lot of these field workers still collecting objects from different communities and taking them back to their countries. And how they would then end up in the museum is that when they died, their families would donate the objects to the museum with the metadata that was put on the objects based on the person who collected them.
Thank you, Samba, for that. We had one more question from the chat. That's also kind of in a similar vein around the museums. So the question, or the first part of the question is more of a statement that says, the masks are displayed in the Museum under Cultures of the World. Obviously, they are better off where they are right now. Would the museum be open to the idea of a virtual exhibition of the masks, but all funds raised, to go to the advancement of Mukanda operations?
Victoria, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I would like to respond to that. First of all, we with the Women's History Museum and also with the Choma Museum and communities, we have started a program where we are giving information to some of these objects. And like Samba said, it's about 800 objects. So you can imagine it's lots of work, and the objects belonging to different communities. And I would support the idea that we can have an exhibition or exhibitions around some of these objects, and you get the funding back to the communities. As you can see, just talking to one person who represents this community, and in this short period of time, the amount of information and knowledge that we have gained, can you imagine if it's a deliberate movement to make sure that the school is preserved and we learn from them and get the correct information and put in the museum what is correct? That would go a long way. And I think Mwata would agree with me if we can have funding that can get to the Mukanda school. To me, it would be one way of restitution. And also one way, somebody said nobody has apologized for these things that have happened to Africa. To me, that could be one way of making peace and starting afresh together.
That's true. Just to add on to that, Victoria, with the museum, we've also digitally repatriated a lot of these objects. There's a database of the 800 different artifacts, and they are, as we speak, they're being put onto a server, and it will go live in the next couple of weeks. We'll share the information. But the idea of all of that is to obviously democratize the artifacts or provide access to source communities for the work that we're doing now. And I smiled a bit at the comment around they're better off where they are. That's like an interesting discussion that we constantly have. Are they better off in the museums, or should they come back to their source communities? I mean, we just had the discussion around the separation and decontextualization and dislocation of an artifact. You know, is it useful, even if it's there and it's in a storeroom, in a cold room, if it doesn't provide the actual meaning as an object, number one. Number two, the concept of museums is very Western. We didn't have museums before colonization. It's very much about objects of curiosity. But we have living histories, meaning that the objects that mostly were taken were objects that were used in communities on a daily life. So they would wear and tear, they would change, they would morph, you know, some of them would even be destroyed. So part of that has also been disrupted and destroyed because of this idea of preservation. So I think it's a wider discussion that we continue to have with our source communities, with our scholars, experts, you know, artists around that, and we'll continue to have this conversation. I just wanted to make that point. We can have.
Thank you, Samba, for that. I was feeling similarly when I read that statement, so I appreciate you sort of shedding light on that. We're coming to the end of our time, but we do have 2 raised hands. I think we'll probably have time for one of them. So I'm so sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name, so I'll just spell it Kmchwang. If you would like to, if you're able to, if your connection allows, could you show us your face and feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question now. Thank you. You're still muted, so we can't hear you.
Sorry, my name is Kim Chuang. I'm from Cameroon. I was just about to lower my hand after Samba spoke because the particular observation that somebody made concerning whether the objects are better off where they are has always been it has always bemused me as an artist and also as an academic when it comes to restitution. I remember very clearly in my community here in Cameroon, my forefathers, they made this object or this heritage object, and they had all the functional and spiritual elements that were all attached to it. And like Samba observed, we didn't have museums. But I remember in my community also, we had areas specifically made for the conservation of these. Also have, in my community, I don't know about the other communities, we also have in my community a number of specific elements that are prepared from natural herbs and plants that are used for the conservation of belief has always been, and this belief comes also specifically when it comes to this object, that nobody creates something that they cannot actually maintain. But like Samba said, it's an ongoing discussion with a number of people having lots of other ideas about it. So thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you so much for your contribution, and it's really validating to hear other communities and how they are facing the same question and have the same feelings. And I think this is why it's important to have these discussions so that we are not working in silos but come together to validate this knowledge and information and our perceptions. But Victoria, did you want to respond to that, or Amata?
No, I think I would just say what you said, that as Africa, we need to come together. It's a common problem, and we need to see what others are doing and continue with that conversation. And to say that that object is better off in where it is, I don't know what makes it better off where it is, but you can imagine with misinformation, it's like somebody calling you a wrong name. I don't know whether you can say I'm better off being called a wrong name. It's all these things. It's like being cut off from where you belong, and just having your arm being somewhere else, your leg being somewhere else, your head being somewhere else. And some people might not understand the emotional feelings that we have when we see these objects. You really feel like a part of you has been chopped off.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Victoria. I think we have time for one more question, one more hand, and then we can quickly go through the chats as well before we close. Eno, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. I don't see any hands now, but I think we had a raised hand earlier, so if you still have your question, please feel free to raise your hand again. If not, I can just read a couple of the comments from the chat. So I'll wait a little bit, but oh, here we go. So Chris, please go ahead and turn on your camera and feel free.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really very grateful to our speakers today and for sharing their experience and knowledge. And actually, my question is relating to one of the communities down here in Uganda, when the colonialists actually through missionaries wanted to medicalize the process of circumcision, which is exactly looking like the same as what happens in Zambia. These guys actually protested the move of medicalization, and they started naming people giving them demeaning names. Those who were actually circumcised from hospitals and so on and so forth. So even these guys were not so fitting in the community. They were not so much identified as community members of the Bagisu community. So I am wondering, is there an example of maybe the local community in Zambia where they protested and they had different kind of activity going on to show their dissatisfaction in that kind of regard? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that there's one good example that I would give, and it was recorded. And I know that Mwata has one example which is recent, so I will let him say his. Let me just explain the earlier one. In the 1970s, on the Copper Belt, the the people from the Luvale speaking people would set up a mukanda, and that was after independence, because ceremonies that were banned during colonialism were being revived. And the Luvale people felt, they are now in this place where they are also free to practice their culture. And they set up a mukanda, and fellow Zambians who belong to other ethnic groups protested. They said, no, they shouldn't put up a mukanda. And they had this residue from the colonial propaganda. And they also said, this is evil, this is witchcraft, we don't want it here. And they protested to the police. And the police went and they went to close the mukanda. And one minister who was from the Luvale speaking people stood up in parliament and threatened to resign if the police did not apologize and allow the Luvale people to continue to do their practice even on the Copper Belt, because that's what independence was about. And that his threat was understood and taken seriously, and the government resolved that the police had no right to do what they did, and they also calmed down the other ethnic groups. So that is one protest that happened within ourselves, but which we could see that it was taken to the level of a minister who protested, and since he had that forum. But recently, Mata, you talked about the women wanting to undress because the mayor said something, and you can explain that.
Thank you very much. Recently, during the Mukanda camp, which I had, the civic leader, the mayor of Livingston City, said, we are giving you only 2 months so that you close Mukanda. Because our syllabus is taking you from 6 to 8 months to finish the syllabus. So the women from the community, they wanted to go and protest there so that their children must finish the syllabus. So it's an example that people that really want their culture to continue, and to show that no one should intimidate us. And in Zambia, the Luvale and the other, the Luvale group, mostly the Western party and the Northwestern, which there are many. But in part like Southern province, we are few. But it's not a reason that we cannot perform our culture. No, we should do it because we have that right to do it. That is the challenge. But where you find the Luvale men, they don't allow that. They can even to fight, but we don't promote fight. But we want to resolve things amicably. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amwata. Do we have anything else?
I think as of now, I don't see any more hands raised, but I think Chris kind of mentioned everything that he'd written in the chat. So as far as I see, I think that's the last comment.
Okay. So I think this has been, I feel like the conversations can continue for a while. And obviously, we will continue having these conversations. And I, as the first event, I'm really happy that we were able to get into the nitty-gritty of some of the things that have been contentious. And thank you so much, Wamwata, Victoria, Mihayo, for allowing us to gather and have these conversations. It's our first DRR event, and obviously we had invested a lot in it, and I think we're pleased with the way that it has turned out. We've had the conversation that we wanted to, and obviously we'll continue the conversation. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined. As we said, we have our social platforms on Twitter, our Instagram. Heba mentioned earlier that we had been removed from Instagram, but they will not silence the revolution. You can follow us on Twitter, and you can sign up to our newsletter, and we'll be providing more information. Our next event is happening next week on the 18th of October, and it will be moderated by Heba Abdel Awad, and we will have the second conversation around fertility dolls. So please sign up to the newsletter, sign up to the conversation on Twitter. And obviously we had so many comments in the chat, and we thank you so much for your enthusiasm, your encouragement, all the hearts. We thank you so much, and we want to continue the conversation with you. So even offline, we can find each other on Twitter, and you can email us as well, any information that you might want, and if you want to be part of our conversations again. So just like to say thank you, and stay tuned for the second part of our series of conversations next week. And with that, I will close the conversation. Once again, to our speakers, to Mihayo, thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.